Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Follow us, likes, double tap.
What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to the 817 Podcast, where we talk about the lovely city of Fort Worth, Texas. We get into politics, business, culture, news. If it impacts you as a Fort Worthian, we discuss it. I'm with my co-hosts, Ann Zeta, and I am EJ Carry-On, and today is Super Bowl Sunday.
And you look like it's Super Bowl Sunday. If we were recording video along with our audio, everyone would see you decked out in
Fly,
your
Eagles,
teams.
Fly, Eagles, fly. But what's crazy, you know what's funny is, like, I've never shared that I'm an Eagles fan because I lived in, the people in Texas already have a lot of reasons to not like me. So it's just like also being the rival to the Dallas Cowboys favorite, like that's your favorite team. And that's my favorite team because I grew up that way. You know, 95% of my family is in North Philadelphia. First shirt out of the womb was an Eagle shirt. I lived in Texas with a gray and green room with Eagle jerseys. I would bet my friends in high school if the Cowboys win, I'll wear the Cowboys jersey. If the Eagles win, you have to wear an Eagles jersey to school. And so I've always been like this. But for that reasons, though, we got to get this nice and snappy for you guys. This is how much we love you guys. That on Super Bowl weekend, my behind, and me and Ann woke up at 8 a.m. to give you a show. And so we're going to give you 3 short stories. We're going to have an interview as the big story with Katrina Carpenter. And we're going to be able to talk about a lot of things. To me, the short stories that we're going to go through, a couple of them are updates, impacts, but there's some juiciness in there as well that I got a lot to say about.
Yeah, I think so. We decided to start with number one being kind of updates and opportunities because we've got a lot of dates of things that people can participate in. So we have been keeping tabs on all of the filings for folks that are running for city council in the city of Fort Worth. And I think that there is a Fort Worth Report article that we will share with you where they are keeping up with those. But I think that isn't even up to date as we are from checking this morning. There have been 2 additional filings for District 5. So we're now up to 6 candidates in District 5. And there has been an additional filing in District 11. So now there are 3 people running in District 11. So I don't know if we want to go into any more detail on that, but filing ends on February 14th at 5 o'clock, I believe. And some people wait until the last day of filing just to kind of keep things under wraps until that last moment. So we could see some additional. There's a couple of seats that don't have any challengers. Yeah. Just the incumbent is running with no challengers.
And I think we'll get in a lot of the tea on what's going on. This is to me, if we didn't have an interview, the conversation around the dysfunction of and the politics of District 6, possibly District 5, which we'll probably learn more about later, but then also just how seats like Macy Hill and Alan Blaylock have nobody going against them. And, why is it such an easy ride for some people while the infighting and some of the more black and brown or progressive seats turns us against each other? But we'll dive into that probably in story number 3.
Yeah, I think partially it is the openness of the seats. Yeah. Filing against an incumbent is a challenging thing to do. So when seats are open, we typically do get more people filing.
Absolutely. We're also going to talk about events.
Yes. So we have several events coming up. The Catalyst Project is hosting a training on folks that might be interested in running for school board. I think that will also be something that would be interesting to folks that might be considering running for Tarrant County. I think that might be a panel that would be interesting to folks running for Tarrant County Community College as well, which has, I think, 2 seats in this rotation. I'm not absolutely sure on that. I know that one of the seats is not running again. Former Mayor Ken Barr has announced that he's not running again. So there is an open seat there. So that Catalyst Project, February 13th is that training, and that's the day before the final day of filing. So if you're thinking about running for a school board seat, that would be something that you might want to consider taking advantage of. There are 2 panels coming up on February 26th. Steer Fort Worth has a panel on the future of the city, which EJ is a moderator of one of the panel discussions for that. And that's at 5:30 in the evening, hosted by Steer Fort Worth. And then Fort Worth Report is having another candid conversation also on February 26th, but in the morning, early in the morning, like 7:30, talking about access to mental health in our community. So those are all things that folks can take advantage of. And then we also have an 817 Gather coming up.
Yes.
That is going to be on the 16th. And unfortunately, I will be out of town, so you all
we can get in
just
trouble.
run amok.
Yes, we can get in
amok.
trouble. So February 16th, you all, is the 817th Gather. It's our fourth one. Basically, we want to turn the podcast community into a live, active community where listeners are turning into leaders. There's a lot of things we're going to talk about on February 16th. It'll be obviously closing of filing because that's February 14th. But also, we want to help our community members decide what's the thing you're most concerned about. Is it education? Is it immigration? Is it mental health services? Is it economic development? And how do we start building capacity so that we can look at those things from a more progressive lens and start holding the city accountable and organizing? I think a part of the 817 Gather comes from the frustration of the lack of organizing among this large tent of progressive independent thinkers who are constantly self-assessing what they believe is right, but also having a we instead of me mentality. So we will love to have you at the 817 Gather and get to meet other Fort Worthians who are in this space. We do this every third Sunday of the month.
So our next topic that kind of rose to the top when we were sharing articles this week was kind of all the executive orders that have been coming out at the federal level. And there's been several articles locally about what impacts those are having here locally. So we're still kind of looking at this from the lens of our local news and our local organizations. But there were a couple of articles, the first one being a Fort Worth Report article with the title of UTA creates a task force in response to wide-ranging executive orders from Trump and Abbott. So following a slew of federal and state executive orders affecting higher education, the University of Texas at Arlington has set up a task force to monitor and respond to their impact. The task force, announced by the president, in an internal memo, will develop guidance for the changing legal terrain affecting the university and ensuring its compliance. There's also an article in the Star-Telegram referencing TCU's website boasting DEI as being a key to the university's mission, and now that page has been taken down. So I found it interesting between these two universities, one being a private institution and the other one being a public institution. The private institution, I believe, doesn't have to follow these executive orders, and the public institution does, but the public institution has formed a task force in order to look at these executive orders and determine their impact and make decisions about what they need to do moving forward, whereas the private institution has just removed any reference to DEI from their website.
Well, I think that's an easy assessment there. UTA services working class kids, diverse population. I believe majority of their kids who attend their school is Hispanic.
Yeah, they're a Hispanic serving institution.
So obviously DEI is important there. And then TCU services majority rich, elite, donor-heavy white kids. And oftentimes those donor-heavy people in Texas are also supporters of what priorities the president today elect has. So, yeah, and it's fascinating to see that dynamic play out. What are going to be the impacts of DEI across businesses, universities, and how does that look? You're seeing some social movements like you're seeing what happened with Costco, and you're also seeing that social movement, what happens to Target. Will it also impact enrollment in education? I'll be interested to see how it plays out.
Yeah, and then there was also a very specific threat from our governor of removing the president of Texas A&M University after an email surfaced inviting staff to a conference that had some indication that it was serving folks of color and that those participants would be such. So I think that, everybody's kind of just sitting on pins and needles trying to figure out if they still have a job.
Yeah. And Fort Worth ISD received $61.9 million in federal funding for the current school year. The response about the 6% of the district's overall budget, that's about 6%. Part of the total was $13.3 million the district received in Title I funding to support economically disadvantaged students. And it's not even just our economically disadvantaged students. I mean, you're talking now, even talking about educating our incarcerated youth, and that being up for challenges. You can control and lead a group of people when you don't give them the funding of education. But what's important about all this Department of Ed stuff at the federal level, when you look at, and I'll put this in the show notes, when you look at what percentage of a state's primary and secondary education revenue comes from the federal government, the ones that are at the top, I'm going to show you which ones have the most impact on this, and you tell me what they all have in common. South Dakota, Montana, Arizona, Alaska, Arkansas, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Florida, Wyoming. Then you have Maine, New Mexico, Colorado, California. Basically, the example is the top 6 there were all Republican states. And so this funding of federal dollars are actually impacting the people who supported the president's initiatives and to be there. 30% of rural jobs come from some type of government role. And a lot of that has federal influence.
Yeah. And then this also impacts our cities and our counties and our nonprofits. And so there is an article talking about the federal funding freeze stirs panic and confusion for Tarrant County Meals on Wheels. But I'll tell you, just being in the nonprofit space myself, I know multiple nonprofits that were kind of sitting and waiting and trying to figure out if they were going to be able to continue their missions. And why that impacts us directly here in Tarrant County and in Fort Worth is that we are constantly pointing to our public-private partnerships and how proud we are of serving people in our community through these public-private partnerships with either business or nonprofits. And many of those nonprofits get federal funding and rely upon grants. And we pride ourselves in doing that in order to avoid having taxes that are taken from our citizens and used for those services. But these nonprofits rely upon federal dollars, which are our tax dollars as well. So they may not be called directly taxes, but they are our tax dollars. So I'm fine with that. I think it's good. But when disruptions happen in these areas, then we don't have a structure or a system in place to continue providing these vital services because of the upheaval of one man who's decided that he's going to put a stop to these things.
Yeah, and you're right. I've heard other local nonprofits talk about how they have frozen or decided to move off of money that they expected to receive. Some in the tens of thousands, some in the hundreds of thousands. And so you're seeing that impact in the work we do in our company. We are a company that serves education. And a lot of times they use federal dollars. So we're seeing that hit as well. I wonder what it does for Panther Island with so much of that being a federal dollars usage. I mean, that was probably already allotted, but I haven't seen a lot of stories about what impact could this have on the future of Panther Island.
Yeah, and transportation is another aspect. They just announced some federal dollars to for our transit services here
you
in
imagine
Tarrant County.
the efforts of the Juneteenth Museum and all that stuff. Like, there's just...
And that all falls into the category that they could point to as DEI. And if they're putting an end to all of that, is that something that's going to be negatively impacted?
And still, like, silence from our leadership. Silence around this. And I think that's also a disappointment when you're a majority minority city. Yeah, I think there's a lot of disappointments on that front.
Earlier we were talking about what our wins and losses were going to be. I think I might have found my loss.
Alrighty, so we're going to go ahead and move into the short story number 3, where we believe there's a lot of tea here that we can be showcasing. So really what we want to talk about, and this has been the conversation that I've been kind of having with people, and that is, why does, like, Democrats, and to me specifically, the Black Democrat community, there's so much infighting, and the infighting allows for us to not have power. I think a 2025 goal for us should be the way that the Republicans vote together, the Democrats vote together in city council, right? Alan Blaylock, Lauersdorf, Macy Hill, Michael Crane, Maddie Parker, Gina Bivens at this point too. They all vote the same. They vote the same. They vote their block. However, the Democrats don't seem to be doing the same, right? You don't see Jeanette and Elizabeth Chris Nettles, and at the time, Jared Williams voting at the same. Carlos Flores is like our mansion of Fort Worth. I don't know where he's going to land. He calls himself a Democrat, but I think he's like, I don't know, he's interesting. So then what happens is you have these elections where this is what's happening in District 6 right now. You have Jared Williams, who surprisingly left, you know, and I think it was a personal reason, and we'll find out more later. But what you're also going to see is, you know, Gina Bivens endorses Marshall Hobbs, a like radical right-wing Republican, which you should just go to Marshall Hobbs' Instagram and see all the things he has to say about his Lord Jesus Savior Christ, Donald Trump. And then you have Dr. Mia Hall, who was on the Crowley School Board. She gets an endorsement from Kendall Locke, who was the Fort Worth District 6 district director under Jared Williams. So, like, basically Jared Williams, you know, go-to person for that he selected to be his person, goes for Mia Hall, while Jared Williams goes for Daryl Davis II, who was the president of the Crowley School Board. And so now you're going to have a lot of energy where, one, this Marshall Hobbs guy is a black man. So you have Gina Bivens, I think a historically credible, like people see credit to her in Fort Worth, endorses Marshall Hobbs.
In a district that's not her district. So the thing I found interesting was that she's made an endorsement in the District 6 race, and I have not seen her endorse in the District 5, where she's no longer running, and there's 6 candidates now.
Yep. With one of those being Deborah Peoples, Mary Kelleher, who was also on the Water Board District. So, yeah, I just like this to me, like when I go out to eat, when I'm doing stuff or people want to talk to me about stuff, it's really about this right now. And I think I'm just massively disappointed because it's bigger than what is ever going on inside. And my assessment of what it looks like in the inside, if I could break down the black political ecosystem, is you got to have this like Alpha Phi Alpha network, right? It's the Roderick Miles, Jared Williams, you know, there's just kind of this big Alpha Phi Alpha core. Then to me, there's like, obviously, like I think you have like the community front line where, you know, it's like Dante and Quentin Phillips, and they're kind of have this like brotherhood. We grew up together, went to Dunbar, you know, legacy of the Moss family. Like that's kind of that core. Then you have kind of like this new rambunctious core that just kind of says like F everybody, and that's like the Chris Nettles and he, you know, they kind of do it their way, and then like I feel like Mia Hall's being thrown in that, like over there in that category. And then I even think like, even though Elizabeth Beck is a white lady, but she kind of is like now this rebel too. Like people, like I feel like there's like the people who don't play nicely, quote unquote, I guess, or come from the outside of these networks. And then you have like the Deborah Peoples class, which was like very like the Tarrant Democratic Party, with like this like legacy church play, and like so it's just like, to me. And then you have just all the random progressives who are not black, but the Hispanic, you know, who's the Hispanic leg, like is you know, Ramon Romero or Matthew McConaughey of the Latin community. I don't know who he is, you know. And then you got Jeanette, who's kind of deciding like how much is she going to be a progressive. So there's that space. And then you got like the Ann Zetas, who are like
I'm just sitting over here being pretty quiet, as you can all hear.
Yeah.
It's so, I mean, so much has changed in looking at this from 2014 when I first ran. And I still clearly cling a little bit to these are nonpartisan seats kind of way of looking at things. And I get that. It's still really hard for me.
I think that's over, and playing nice is over, in my opinion.
Yeah, so I'm dead. I try to be nonpartisan, and I try to be nice all the time.
And now she became a podcaster.
Yeah, so, there you go. Now I can talk about things. But clearly I'm not talking about things as openly as you're talking about things. But I haven't had as many of these conversations specifically to this topic that you have. But as the white lady over here, I'm not quite sure where.
Well, and that's where I was like, I think like, you know, I think I have enough street cred to be and to me it's like, if I am going to talk mess on the red side, I want to be accountable on my, like, I'm not trying to hold ties to anyone. That's why I choose not to have a lot of Fort Worth friends or be a part of a lot of Fort Worth organizations, because I don't want to be tied to anything. I just want to be honest. And what I am seeing, unfortunately, is a lot of infighting among petty stuff when vouchers are here and we should be mobilizing our public school communities. And instead, we have our school board members running for races against each other and being mad at each other. And I think these are, and to me, there's so much ego. You have the Chris Nettles with the Dallas Express that showed him with, talking about how he needs to get something on Jared Williams so he can have leverage on Jared. It's just, to me, what I am understanding is that when we talk about the Fort Worth way, we're not just talking about white elites. The black community also has a Fort Worth way. We all know each other. We all grew up each other. We all went to the same churches. Our parents owned these businesses. Yada, yada, yada. We were part of these fraternities. These are the people who are in. So in a way, the black community also has to get over its own Fort Worth way. And because the majority of people who live in Fort Worth are not Fort Worth way people. They're new people. When Gina Bivens first ran for office, it was half the population that is today. And so at the end of the day, you have these rising Hispanic communities who are going to come and find some type of progressive voice. There's someone who's going to show up for that community. And then we have to not penalize or X out the white educated elites. Like that tent, we have to decide how that tent supports black or brown politicians. If we're ever going to get, to me, what's the main North Star is a progressive council with a progressive mayor. That should be everyone's big goal. And because we have a lot of egos, it's just not happening.
And it seems like there's a lot of rules, too, about like you wait until the incumbent is ready to not be in office anymore. And then you wait your turn and you have served in all these different roles. And so then you're the next person up. And a lot of that is just being thrown out the window and probably should be in many instances. But I think there's not a deep bench of people who have name recognition, have done things in the community to put themselves out there that they can point to say why they should be the next person. Kind of the information that Tara shared with us about people's why and what motivates people, and you pointing out that it has to be something that's going to get people fired up, and that's what's going to get people out to vote, and me always wanting everybody to be wanting to do it for the right reasons of service and for the betterment of the whole and all of that.
And I think that is, when I look at Commissioner Simmons and then Commissioner Miles, which is but we've both interviewed them. So we kind of, we have that observation. Commissioner Simmons is I'm going to attack our judge, and I am going to attack the judge to keep evil leadership accountable, even though now when she has something in her area that needs approved, they're automatically saying no because they simply just don't like her. So it's like where I think the old Fort Worth way, I think you can see this with Nettles and Jared Williams as well. Like Jared Williams was the nice guy. Nettles was the I'm going to keep evil accountable. And now Nettles may not get enough for his constituents, where Jared Williams is trying to get stuff for his constituents. But to me, I think what constituents will really want is, yes, they understand if they don't get the things they want, but it's because you're keeping power accountable and you're being transparent and authentic. I think that's an excuse to use, I'm using politics and being nice so that because when I need something, they're going to give it to me. Because then that's just wrong on how we should be playing politics.
And it makes you compromise maybe on things that you shouldn't compromise on.
Yeah. And so I just think you have a lot of I'll be nice to this because then you'll do this for me. And no, I think it's time to be I think Jeanette Martinez did that with the Mercy Culture thing. She's like, I don't agree with this, but the powers above me have already decided what's going to happen here. And we talked about having our first Latina council member, and we talked in the same meeting, we have our first Hispanic city manager, and yet y'all decide that to not, the one time when you usually go with the person whose district is in, to go, for the white Christian nationalist church. So it's so like playing nice has got us to this point. Playing nicely with the Fort Worth way, I think they're not that powerful. And I think if we build enough capacity and excitement, what I think Trump has done, what all this has done, we're like, I love one of my friends said, I can't say the Detroit Lions. We are the Cleveland Browns. We are 1-14. We are 1-15 as progressives in Texas. There's no more bottom than where we are. But the only way we're going to go up is if we stop making it about what we can get out of Fort Worth and instead keeping the common goal. I know we disagree here. I know I can't stand this person for this reason. I know we don't, agree on these things. But the main goal is that we have the assets to become a progressive city. And, that's the big part that I wish. And my goal is to see, and whatever I can do here on the 817 pod to help do that. This is also, though, showing me when I look at this fracturing among the black community, maybe the way we stop looking at Hispanic people as a monolith, it's just time to stop seeing black people as one voting block. I mean, I think it's hard because 80% still voted Kamala Harris, 90+% with female black women. So it maybe is hard to give up that, but something about Fort Worth where Gina Bivens has decided. I remember first arriving here, people said Gina Bivens was a Democrat, and now she's the person she is endorsing. I'm going to put his Instagram in the description. And it's just jaw-dropping. And it makes sense why she endorsed the Mercy Culture play and why she also has a Mercy Culture she allowed a Mercy Culture church in her district. And people need to start keeping her accountable of like not a representation of us. And when I say us, I mean black people. That's the thing that she got Illuminati'd. I don't know where a part of the process, but she got Illuminati'd. So this is why I think this conversation is important about us coming together as black progressives, white progressives, Hispanic progressives, is I think 2028 is a promising election for us. I'm speaking this into existence already. James Tellerico, the religious educator who fights against Abbott's vouchers, is running up, getting into the press, and it's going to go against Governor Abbott in 2028. The other person, Jasmine Crockett, has gone on to CNN, is really standing up for the DEI initiative. Jasmine Crockett goes up against Ted Cruz in 2028. And then Linda Hidalgo, the judge out of Houston, goes against Ken Paxton. Those three, the white, the black, the Latina politician, coming together to bring Texas, bringing votes, all coming together. And even if we lose at that level, what it does for local races, I'm speaking that in existence today. All right, so now we're going to do an intro. So we're going to introduce Katrina Carpenter, founder of Carpenter's Cafe, one of the best restaurants to have lunch in Fort Worth. And we're going to have her come on and talk, we believe, just having her background of maybe even jumping into some of this stuff, but then also just like, what is it like to be a black entrepreneur in Fort Worth, getting set up. She was a former teacher. So she has a lot of roots here, a lot of history here. And she's going to give us a perspective of how Fort Worth has helped and supported them. And, as we looked at this curve of 2020 with George Floyd to now 2025 anti-DEI, what are the ramifications and impact to black entrepreneurs in our space? So here is Katrina Carpenter.
Born and raised in Lake Como, Texas. That's where the hat's on today. I'm a wife, a sister, a niece, and a mom of 17-year-old twins who drive me crazy. I own and operate Carpenter's Cafe and catering, and that's really it. Like, my story.
But
you have to ask me questions.
So you were born here,
born and raised here.
So tell us about like how, when people say, "Hey, I just moved to Fort Worth," what should I know? What do you say?
You should know all parts of town and not just one part of town.
And what does that mean? Like, what's all the parts?
Networking in every part of town, like east side, west side, south side, not just downtown or the near south side.
Yeah.
Get out of your bubble.
What so give me your like how has Fort Worth changed since you as a kid in Lake Como to now running and operating a business?
How has it changed?
Yeah.
Demographically, I could speak to that. I mean, when I was growing up, I lived on the west side, but I went to school on the east side. I was bused all the way to the east side from 6th grade through 12th grade.
And what school did you go to?
So I started at Como Montessori. I was a part of the first group when they opened that school, and then from there I went to Daggett Montessori, and then from there I went to O.D. Wyatt. So that is one of the things that when people talk to me about being from Fort Worth, I'm always like, well, I've got roots all over.
You were out of the bubble from the very beginning.
From the very gate. I think too, when they opened Como Montessori, we were in school with people that were bused from all over. So I had friends from Aledo that were bused or attended Como Montessori. So it was already a melting pot. And so, and then from there to Daggett, already a melting pot, you know. And so I think that's why I push for it to not just be sides of towns. Like, you really need to know all parts and encourage people to know all parts. But back to how has it changed, I could speak to demographics more than anything because I don't know that I know. I think I may have been a little bit sheltered, or for lack of a better word, when it comes to like politics and things like that. I have no idea how it's changed as it relates to that. I mean, I can look at landscape and demographics and see how it's changed. Like, for instance, Lake Como is demographically changed completely, where we have a huge Latino community that we didn't have when I was growing up. Even in the near south side, down Main Street did not look like that at all in my teenage years or young 20s, like, at all. So when we first opened the Airstream, people would come and visit and they'd look across the street like, wait a minute, that was Club Axis right across the street. Like, what? This doesn't look, so I can speak to that, but not much more.
Well, tell us about like the journey of starting your own business, and like obviously Fort Worth wants to make sure our small businesses thrive. Like, did you always see yourself as an entrepreneur? Like, how did you get to the point of starting your own business?
Absolutely not. No. They asked me 5 years ago, would I have been doing this? And no, absolutely not. Not. I thought I would still be in education. I did not. No. My husband and I used to take chicken salad to the Dallas farmers market. And one weekend the first weekend we went, we started with like 20 containers and we thought we could be there all day, and we were there 30 minutes. And I was like, oh, okay. And still thinking small, we met Lori and Tucker Henderson and got an opportunity to go inside of the Airstream alongside Arcadia Coffee. And when I had friends that would come and visit or come and support, they'd say, you're not going to be here long. Like, there's no way. And I'm like, no, don't rush me. I need at least 2 years. I got to build a following. I don't know any of these people. And I was there 6 months. And then we got the opportunity to take over the space that we're in now through a sublease. And in that moment, I thought you've got to stop thinking so small, because things were way bigger than I kept thinking. Small, small, small. And the business was just growing from underneath us every time. In the entrepreneurial realm, it took me fast.
And what year was that?
2019, June of 2019, in the Airstream. And June until December, and then we started subleasing this space in December of 2019, and then we soft opened February 16th, 2020. Yeah, we subleased for 2 years. And
So what would you share with people who, maybe they see themselves as educators or they have a job but they want to take that leap? What should you wish you would have known about doing something like that in Fort Worth, and what should people know about what's available to them in Fort Worth to do that, to start their business?
So what I wish I would have done differently before taking the leap. So I don't regret taking a leap of faith, but there are some things that I wish I would have done differently. Like, I think that I should have probably networked a little bit more so I could have gotten to know who I was doing business with. Because I'll be honest, there's a lot of predator space. Like, you run into that and you don't realize it because you're so eager or happy about, what you're doing, or happy that people seem happy to help. I think that because our community has not been afforded a lot of opportunity or space, that when someone comes to you with opportunity, it seems like opportunity, but for you, but sometimes it's more opportunity for them. And so just taking that time to kind of learn more about, because although growing up here, again, I go back to what I said in the beginning, I didn't know everybody, right? Fort Worth is big. It's a big, small town. And I didn't know this business circle. So I think spending a little bit more time definitely networking and getting to know the business community first would have eliminated some setbacks for us. Yeah, absolutely. That's the only thing that I would have done different before I started.
So you're saying that, like, there are situations or challenges in Fort Worth where things look like opportunity, but if you're naive or unaware of the situations at place, it's really people being predatory.
Absolutely.
On. And do you feel like that happens to a lot of different entrepreneurs, or do you feel like?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And you feel like regardless of race, gender, like you feel like it's happening. You hear it from all different entrepreneurs.
I can't say that. I cannot say that. That's true. I can only speak to my community of entrepreneurs. I don't know what others outside of my community, what their struggles have been. So I can't speak to that.
Yeah. So okay. Yeah, I was just trying to see if it's like, if there's I'm thinking like, is there a layer of just predatorial tendencies that exist across the whole ecosystem of Fort Worth, rather than like just one or two bad apples? You know what I'm saying? Like, is it more of the system of how we do things rather than a couple individuals?
I think there are some systems that are flawed, but I think that for me, it's definitely individuals who take advantage of systems that are flawed, and they know it. And so knowing how to navigate those flawed systems to their gain.
Yeah.
I think around that same timeline that you're talking about, there was a big push in Fort Worth to support maybe entrepreneurs and business owners and potential business owners that hadn't been supported as much in the past.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's something that you benefited from and was something that kind of helped start a system that was more equitable in that arena? I think that's what we were trying to do as someone who was serving on the elected official side during that time. I think that there was
in what way? Tell me in what way, and then
there's always a lot of talk about how we want to support local, we want to support people who are here in the community already, we want to get away from always just providing the tax incentives and those bigger things to corporations and bigger businesses that we're trying to draw in from the outside. And so I think there was an intentionality on at least the government side of things to be more supportive of local people who might want to grow businesses here in Fort Worth. And to make that, that diversity, equity, and inclusion, which, is something that now is being challenged clearly, to grow that here in Fort Worth.
So I think if we're talking about around the George Floyd time, I think there was a big surge of, people who wanted to help, right? But I think a lot of that was performative also. And it was more of a trend.
It didn't become a structure or a system that then carried on.
No, and with everything that's going on with the DEI stuff now, I think you get to see what it really was.
And how easily it's undone.
Right. And who was really for that and who really was not. Like, let me hop on this trend because if I don't, then they're gonna come out, let me kind of just weed in the middle. But back to what we're talking about when we're talking about it being kind of predatory. So I do want to speak to this, and no pun, but maybe a little intended. For instance, so I was a part of the first Minority Business Award in Fort Worth Rotary, and that was initiated during that time, and after had already been exploited, I was like, no, I don't want to do this. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this, and I was pushed to do it, and I shared the story with the people on the committee now, because I served on that committee afterwards for 2 years straight. And the person that started it, we've had really good conversations now about this same topic. And they put it together for one reason, so they thought. But when we break it down, and we really broke it down, and I challenged them to really think about who this award serves. What is the end goal? Because we had a lot of sponsorships for this award, right? And the purpose of it was to highlight minority-owned businesses. But in the end, really, there was a lot of money that was put back into Rotary, right? And let's not share that, right? Like that, it's a twofold. It is not just serving or highlighting minority-owned businesses, and if that's what we're saying we want to do, and then that's what we need to do throughout the entire structure of this program. That means
the finances as well, not just highlighting the
exactly.
business, but put that money back into those
exactly.
businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I mean by during that time, whereas, everybody's coming up with these things saying, we're helping, but are you really? Or is it, or are you exploiting? Like, you understand where I'm coming from? Like,
Absolutely.
if you're saying you're helping, let's make sure that when we're writing this plan out, that it is exactly that, right? So then I challenge them to, if we're doing that, then we need to be sourcing a minority-owned videographer. We need to be sourcing a minority. And then I also implemented the fair, where all those people who applied for this award, we need to, if we're saying we're highlighting them, if they didn't make it to round 1, 2, 3, whatever, then let's use this platform to allow them to come in and people actually get to talk to them and they get to network, because that process was long and gruesome for me to even do the application. There were several steps. And so I know that they went through those steps too. What are we doing for all of those hundreds of people who applied? So things like that is where I'm saying, yeah, people kind of implemented programs and they got on this bandwagon, but it took us to kind of sit with them and say, is this really serving? Because I don't even know about what is Rotary. Somebody going to tell me what y'all really do? Or you just want to, what? You know? So it's like, I you know, and another one of the things that I shared with them, I'm not going to mention names, I mean, is go and get the people and actually spend some time and share what it means, what Rotary does, and to find out, do they even want to be a part of this? Because in the end, you get awarded like 6 months or a year membership, but nobody asked me if I wanted to be a member.
Yeah.
So the money goes back into the program or the organization, but do you know if I even want to be a part of it? So that's what I mean by, during that time, there was a lot of people or a lot of organizations or even government that we need to do this, we need to do this. And I feel like it was just like a Band-Aid or to say, or a check of the box to say we did it.
Or we're not even asking the people that you say you're doing it for what they really need.
And that happens to us a lot. Even in planning, a lot. That happens to us a lot. It's like, oh, we gave them that. Okay, well, how do we use that?
Yeah, that's a lot of the expert coming in and saying, this is what you need.
Yeah.
And we're here to help you.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, what do you struggle with every day?
Right.
And come together with us what would help you overcome that.
Right.
Like, what would you say is going to be the ramifications or not of like the new state of DEI in the country? And obviously, like in Fort Worth, you're going to probably see some of the things that you were able to at least be a part of, exploitative or not, maybe not be there anymore. Like, what are some of your biggest concerns looking out the next couple of years for Black and brown entrepreneurs?
And to be honest, it's scary for me. I'd be lying if I said anything different. I have found myself recently not being dismissive, but just not wanting to think about the ramifications. Because I've been on the front lines and in the back speaking up since I started business for small businesses on when that task force first when the city put that
coming out of COVID.
Yeah. When they put that small business and some
it was to
committee together.
Right. They had a couple council members on it, and I was one of them. Well, and economic development was part of it too. And then they took it all away and started something else.
Well, I probably was a part of the reason why they took it all away. Was I went straight to Maddie and said, "There's not one small business owner on this who that looks like me. Who?" So here we are again. We've got this committee, but who's there representing? And so then there was a task force birthed for permitting small businesses.
That sounds fun.
And I'm on that task force too. That, out of that, it's just we've got to be more intentional about what we're doing. Right. But back to your question, I found myself just kind of being dismissive when it comes to it. It's hard. It's too hard to digest or even think about the ramifications. It really is.
Do you believe that of the small network of entrepreneurs like you, how many from like starting in 2020, 2021, do you feel like are still here and like really will feel the brunt of a lot of what's happening now? Because I imagine you're scared was your word, and so you're dismissive to it, but honestly, you're also probably scared for it for even maybe less organized, or as you've been kind of been able to hold on and be successful. I feel like you've been one of the few to really sustain and hold. And I mean, that's of all restaurants. I mean, where's Four Sisters at, right? Where's Cannon at? This is you've stayed and are doing your business. I just wondered. I feel like a lot of people who don't know that experience doesn't understand how hard that is to stay alive past 2 years, regardless. But now when you add the racial perspective of George Floyd happened, a surge of people wanting to support black entrepreneurs. Now we're at DEI, and we don't believe in DEI as a state. I mean, we're talking like, could that be a 20% hit on our support of our businesses? And is there a collaboration in talking of this kind of thing, of what to do? To support each other through this nonsense of anti-DEI like work?
I think opportunities that were once available will dry up. They've already started to, right? But the work, if you were in the community, my community, even if the focus has shifted, our focus has not shifted, right? For those of us in community, the work hasn't stopped. We've always kind of leaned on each other, and we'll continue to do that. We will continue to do that. So, even, and not everybody benefited from not all of us did. Like, we were still relying on one another. So I think that'll still remain. Our community has always been that, where we've kind of relied on one another. So, and I'm happy about that, because that doesn't go anywhere, right? We'll still continue to do that. What scares me, though, is, it's hard to say it, is that our voice in those spaces will be discounted.
Because I imagine, the other tough part, like you, in a way, like I feel like being dismissive is also like you have to protect.
It is protection. It is like protect survival mode.
Yeah,
it is. I think that I've been afforded opportunities that not all of business owners in Fort Worth that look like me have been in a way. For instance, my husband and I owned our home, right? We had no house payments, no car payments before we went into business. So that I already, in a way, there was a leg up. So people, I've never really spoke about this, because I think that people get a false interpretation too of how we made it or how we are making it. We don't have the same expenses, or we didn't start out with the same expenses that some do, right? And so I think, and that's when Travis, that's why he really pushed me. It's like, no, I got us, do it. Because we may not always be able to, and we are now, so do it now. And I've never shared that, so I'm glad I am now, because I don't think people realize that that's a part of the story too. And that's why, is I was able to pay bills in my space and not have to worry about finances and in our personal life, right? Or the business taking care of personal finances. And so that helped us. But for those of us who are, right, and we're in a 2-part entrepreneurial homes, I know I've got 3 friends that are like that. and that are relying on, I lost my train of thought, but back to that. That is why I think I showed up in so many spaces to advocate for us, because I knew that so-and-so probably doesn't have the time like I do, right? So when I show up, I'm not showing up just for me. And anybody that's been in those spaces with me, sometimes the only person looking like me, I am speaking for all of us all of the time. All of the time. Whereas I know that this person can't leave their business, and I at a time, during that time, I could. I think what concerns me though now is that me, even in those spaces, because of what's going on, my voice, and I'm almost emotional talking about it, will not carry the weight that it has at one point, because they don't have to worry about that anymore. Yeah,
there's a
they
whole
don't have to
population
worry
that just
about
can dismiss it
anymore. When at one point we were challenged to be mindful, and now it's like, you don't have to do that. You don't have to be intentional about supporting. And it's not just race. I think too, people get it mixed up. That's the reason why my mural is the way it is on the side of the building, because people think diversity, equity, inclusion is just race, and it's not. It is absolutely not. People don't know. Like, we have a wide range of diversity inside of my restaurant. Yeah. And it's not just race. Yeah.
I think there's two things that you brought up about using the privilege that you had and the capacity that you had to go beyond just building your own business, and then also using the lessons learned that you had to continue to speak those things so that others won't have to have those same struggles.
Absolutely. All the time.
Yeah.
I am all the time doing that. I think now it's crazy because that's probably what a little outside of the restaurant I'm a little bit known for. And I realized that probably a couple of months ago when I was approached by Visit Fort Worth. I'm like, oh, I actually do that often.
I think the thing that gets me too, though, is like, I agree. Like, your people got each other, and y'all are gonna get through this because of each other, like how you've always done it. But there's always this gap of lack of accountability between progressive elites who maybe played it and really took advantage of George Floyd and really did the work then because it was the hot thing to do. But I feel like the actions of those progressives, which is, I'm in that category, our responsibility to stay still being consistent, investing in marginalized entrepreneurs. Like, there's that cohort that can't allow this whole thing that's happened at DEI stuff to stop us from supporting places like your restaurant, and then the other part though is like, I don't think we should be giving our leaders a pass for allowing, like, so many people have more privilege than you do.
Absolutely.
And they're playing more scared. And they're not standing up for DEI or your seat at those groups. And so what I'm trying to figure out is the people who listen to the pod, they fall in between those two ranges. A progressive privileged elite or someone in local power. And they're probably, a staff, an employee who can't say stuff, right? It's like they have to be quiet too. It's like everybody is quiet. So if the employee who's supposed to be supporting DEI can't say anything, he has to follow line. The entrepreneur you brought up throughout this has to be quiet and stay in line. Who at this point has the right to be bold?
Or who will?
Yeah.
And not necessarily the right, but who just will.
Yeah.
Who will remain steadfast and continue the work no matter what, because that's what I meant earlier. It's going to be interesting to see, who will continue. And I've already seen some of it, and people have just continued no matter what, because that is what they want to do at their core. And so I think that's what we'll see. I don't know what the resolve will be outside of, like I said earlier, us leaning on each other like we've always done. I don't know what the resolve will be for those in higher power who don't or won't, outside of us doing what we always have done.
And I imagine you also, like, this is the part that I also don't think it's fair. It's like you'll get this progressive political group telling you as a local entrepreneur you need to do more. Oh, you're right, like that has to drive you crazy, because you actually have to run a successful business here, like you said, and have a menu for everyone. So it's like that's also the hard part. It's like, who is the person and how can we do this without having to take out ourselves by being the bold one,
and to be able to make an impact without constantly hitting a wall.
Yeah. Do you get that though? Like the others, like saying you're not doing enough, standing up against things?
EJ, now you're opening up a Pandora's box.
817 pod.
I've caught it all. I've caught it all. I've caught it all. I've caught it from all sides. All sides. It's crazy because I am not. I am very much so. I like conversations where I'd like to go to I think I was raised like that in church. You go to your brother and sister in Christ and you have a conversation with them. If there's any kind of discord, that's what you're supposed to do. And so that is how I was raised, and that is how I handle conflict. But there are some of us who would like to see me, which is why I sympathize, would like to see me handling it differently. That is just not me. No, I ain't no killer, but don't push me. For real. I believe that that's what we're supposed to do. And so because people don't see me advocating in the way that they advocate, they feel like I'm not doing enough, and they just don't know how much I've actually done.
That's why I'm glad you shared today,
Yeah.
because the things that you did is setting up structures so that those things don't just peter out and go away.
They just don't. They have no idea, because I'm also not one who desires or wants. I don't like the front. I don't like the cameras and all that, and I don't really need the pat on the back. I just want to know that you did what you said you were going to do. That's it. And then so that I can go and finish doing what I want to do. So go back to what you're saying. I've caught it from all sides. Like, oh, she over there with them white folks. She gonna make it. She'll be all right. And when I'm like, no, I actually need you over here supporting me, because there are people that don't look like me that don't really like that I'm still here. So please don't take that route. Right? So I catch it from that space. Whereas, some might feel like I'm a little laxed because, oh, she's going to be okay. And they just don't. What? Do you know the conversations that I am having with people who do not look like me? Come ask. Come sit down and, and I can tell, there's a long list. I can tell you how I've spent days at old and new City Hall, tapping you on your shoulder, or hey, or sending text, emails, video, like all of the time, all while still trying to run my business. So yeah, like you kind of brought up
almost like this infighting thing, and we were earlier talking about the infighting between the political part. I don't know how much you've kept up with District 6 or District 5, but we're talking about the politics of like the infighting between the black community in politics. But you kind of reminded me of it because how you talked about like some of that infighting that you're hearing is from your own people saying you're fine with the white folks. So like, could you give me someone who like you have an amazing lens to discuss this? You were born here, and you grew up in the church. I mean, you're Fort Worth through and through. Can you give us context of what makes it hard for like the infighting happening and why and why there just seems so much dysfunction?
I think that first of all, I would love to see my people organize way better and more strategic than we do. That's number one. Let me step back though and tell you this. I've got a really good friend who's not only a good friend, a confidant, and an advisor. And when I first went into business, I will not mention names, but when I first went into business, he told me, get ready for politics. And I was like, oh, whatever. I don't care about politics. Like I just want to cook. I'm not, whatever. Like, that's not me. So whatever. And he was like, okay. And I'm like, what do you, I'm like, literally there was naivety there. Cause I was like, I don't know what the hell he's talking about. Like, that's not me. Whatever. Year 2 in, I started to realize, I'm like, oh.
Everything is political.
I'm like, oh, what? I know you are lying to me. Like, I just want to cook and see people enjoy good food. And you mean to tell me this is what I got to deal with? This is crazy. So now having to learn what that looks like. And unfortunately, what it feels like too. Now my antennas are up. And then that's when I got to see, man, we do a horrible job at, like, if we would just sit and organize and stick together, we could do big things, but we won't. And I don't know why, right? I don't know why. I think that some of it is very much so systemic. Because here's the deal. If we would just stop to think about who benefits from us being divided, start there, then we'd be in a much better place. If we just start there. Like, okay, we've got all these people running for the same. Who benefits from us being divided? Every time we shoot ourselves in the foot.
And I would say this is something EJ and I touched on earlier, that it's not just the black community. Because in 2014, when I very first ran for office, District 9 has a high population of Hispanics that live in District 9 and has never been represented by a Hispanic council representative. And there was a candidate that filed to run in 2014 who literally other folks in the Hispanic community put another name on the ballot in order to have 2 Hispanic surnames on the ballot and actively thwarted her candidacy. And it was more of a gender issue at that point. But that is what, to your point about who benefits from there being division in that community, is what's led to that district being represented.
Organize. It has to happen.
Yeah.
Because if it doesn't, we are back in the day, like in the Como neighborhood. I don't know if you are familiar with Miss Viola Pitts. Organize. I was a little kid sitting on my grandmother's porch, and I didn't know a damn thing about voting or who. I was a kid. I was middle, like 5th grade, but I knew who Miss Viola Pitts was, and I knew when it was time to vote. I knew that they were voting on something because she organized.
And anybody that was planning to run for office showed up over there because she organized.
And we've just got to get back to that. And back then, I don't think that you saw a lot of, or you're running. That's who it is. That's what it is. The end.
And,
Right.
and we don't see that today. It
No.
feels like and then it's like now there's
No.
4 people running.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we have all of these personal and individual agendas, right, we don't know how to, we don't come together for the common good of who we say we're serving, then the people don't get served.
Yeah. No pun intended. That
Whether
you run
it be
catering,
food,
get
or
served.
service.
Yeah.
So I think why this is also an important conversation around organizing is like my fear is that if the trails show that Fort Worth could or could not keep its DEI department, organize. It's like my fear is that this just becomes like we're so used to this hate at this point where it's like who's going to show up to City Hall, who's going to make a stand in Fort Worth, or are we going to be where the West begins, meanings where we're the city that aligns with the state's agenda. And that's one of my biggest fears about all this. It's like, will Fort Worth show up for the dismantling of DEI and supporting the things that we all care about?
I just and I'm perplexed when I am in such a weird space when it comes to that. I have so much hope, and then at the end of that deep breath, there's some defeat there. If I'm being honest,
Oh yeah,
it's just like, man, we have worked so hard just to muster up the energy to show up. And then so I am hopeful that there will be many of us alike and not show up and continue to do the work no matter what.
yeah.
That is my hope. I don't know at this point. I just don't.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know who that's going to be. That, if it's completely dismantled, I don't know who it is.
And it's probably a we thing. It's going to take a step of courage for all of us to do it together. It's because it's a big statement that has engulfed the country, not just our city and county. So like a part of, if we are playing the long game though, maybe that's the answer. Like maybe the long game is, hey, keep this coin going. Let's not like ruffle feathers, because then the last thing we need is somebody getting, challenged, or now, people are not they're targeting people. So like it is a way for us to just kind of hold our breath through it.
Yeah, I think it's going to also come down to true allyship, right? Like, are you really an ally? I have seen some, people that are still, and I'm going to say being intentional about who they're sourcing to do different things, like when they need. I've not stopped getting calls yet, thank God. But I also feel like too that has a lot to do with the network that we've built, and I'm gonna touch just a little bit on that really quick, EJ, because it is, I've pushed my people to network, but I would be remiss if I didn't say that for those who don't or can't or won't, it is very much so systemic. Don't feel like they belong in those spaces. Don't know, it's uncomfortable space. I am not comfortable, which is why I still show up and I try to bring, because we don't trust. I need a trusted face. And so then it sets us back when we have not networked, right? It does. It just does. Fort Worth is a very relational town. It just is, and I think my business has survived really on the cusp of the relationships that I have built, and it was not easy showing up in spaces. Even my very first Near Southside meeting, when Travis and I went, I looked and I told him, literally my hands were shaking, and it was tough to show up to those every first Wednesday of the month by myself, because he was at work. He still works a full-time job. But the strength and the courage just to keep showing up, even when I was uncomfortable in those spaces, I kept showing up.
And bringing people.
And
now
bringing
you're not by
people.
yourself there anymore.
And it looks completely,
It
room looks
absolutely
completely
does.
different.
The last
does.
morning breakfast that we were at.
It does.
Yeah.
But it was very hard for me, contrary to popular belief, very hard for me in that space every first Wednesday. I would still, it took me probably a year before I was not moving around the room, dreading my turn to speak, because they go around the room and everybody introduce, and I would kind of slide over or go get coffee again so that I could
Get out of the rotation.
Yes. And now I can come and really own my space in the room. I actually sit on the board now too, and I'm constantly bringing, no, because you deserve to be in this room too. And it's taken time. And so I think that's one of, it's to your detriment when you don't network. But systemically, we've been pushed aside and not had access to those spaces. I never knew anything about that. Never knew. I commend Megan and them for doing the job that they do, because they came and reached and got me, right? But I also know firsthand some that they have reached to try to get, and they have turned because they don't trust, right? So I think that's, I've seen it firsthand. I know what it does when we don't accept the olive branch. I know what it does to us, and I know what it does for us when we do. And now more than ever, we've got to network and
Find those true allies.
we really do.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great way to end, because I think it's kind of full circle when you talked about your first, if I could change anything, it would be who I was doing business with, because you had the feeling of, and you got exploited or predatorial.
Absolutely.
And now, and so you're right, you have these colleagues who are saying no to that olive branch because they've also maybe have been exploited.
Or for the fear.
Yeah, of being exploited.
Yeah.
And so when they see you in the room now, you make that olive branch more, they feel like easier to go reach.
Also, too, and to your point, now I am absolutely more mindful of the rooms that I am in, too, because of that.
Because you represent that.
Right.
You want to make sure you're
And
not.
there are people who absolutely trust me in spaces, and they will show up because they know I'm there. And so, to that point, when you see me not in those spaces, it is definitely because of that. Because now there is a weight. Oh man, I did not ask to be put in, but in leadership, it just kind of happened. And so I am very mindful now of the spaces that I am in, because I know that they trust me, and that if they see me there, then they feel like it is a trusted space. So yeah, very much so, full circle. Good ear.
That was a great interview that we had with Katrina Carpenter, a fantastic member of our community, someone I order food from on the regular. So we were glad to have her join us today and appreciate everything that she does for the community. So we always end with our wins and losses, and we try to start with our losses so that we can end on a win. And mine this week are going to be a little bit more general in nature because I literally have so many things that have triggered me and could possibly be losses, but I'm going to just say that many of the executive orders that have been coming down that are targeted specifically at vulnerable communities that I have worked really hard to support and be an ally of has been very disconcerting. In the last couple of weeks, it really feels like much of the effort and work and energy that a large group of people have been putting in for many, many years is just kind of being undone. And I just find that to be a huge loss and very concerning. And I don't want to go into every single little detail of what those are because I'm sure that you all would recognize what they are. But that's my loss for this week.
My loss is I was trying to see if I would do this because I don't know how to do it without, driving people crazy more in Fort Worth. But my loss, I'm 100% for students. I'm 100% for giving students experiences. I'm 100% for investing in students' colleges and making sure they have a prosperous life. This is not about that. This to me is about, is this how and the only way we should be talking about and giving money to kids. So what I am talking about is, you guys know that I'm not the most cowboy of Fort Worth, but I believe that there was a kid who won, Madison Kopp. She won $375,000 for selling Alley Cat, a heavyweight American crossbred steer, which is cool. I mean, she's a sophomore. That's awesome. But the kicker of the loss here is that how the stockyards in this group works. I don't know all the logistics. I have had a little bit of conversations around it. But, right, the Fort Worth Way elites love the stock show, and this allows them to get their money and decide really like that money and decide who kind of that pot and who's going to buy the cow or the other livestock. And to me, the problem is that the positioning it as, oh, this is for kids who don't have the ends of the means. But obviously, if you look back at the winners, predominantly white, predominantly legacy ranchers, if you can even get into this game to create such an animal and support such an animal, there's no way you're actually that poor. And so to me, it's this $375,000 for the cow, which at the end of the day is going to go to the feeder if they don't make it to the zoo, I hear. But if they go to the feeder with all the $2,000 cows. So this money raised, that could take 5 kids to full tuition to UTA. 5 kids could get a full ride to UTA if we gave this to, that's the amount of money. And so to me, I just think when people talk about, oh, rich people will just donate money and solve problems, or will they create legacy elite experiences that makes them feel good? And yes, some maybe arguably middle class kids will benefit from it, which this is congrats. All right, congrats. But that to me is why you can't rely on Fort Worth Way rich people to donate money to right ways, right? I mean, to be frank, Madison has won more money than the Tarrant Democratic Party has. So there it is. I rest my case. Cool.
So my win is a little general as well. I think
I'm going to start doing the only wins and losses because
I don't come up with enough.
Yeah. But go ahead.
I know. I think I probably do need to put a little bit more thought into these things before we meet. I focus a lot on the articles and the news, and
you make sure we dot our I's and cross our T's.
I tend to forget about the wins and losses. But my win, we started off the top of the show with several opportunities for folks to participate in things that I think will address some of the things that we identified today as being lacking in our community. And so I think that my win is that there are Fort Worth Report and Catalyst Project and Steer Fort Worth groups providing these opportunities, bringing people together, the 817 Gather, bringing these ideas to be discussed amongst people to try to tackle some of the lack of things that we identified in today's.
Yeah, I love that. My win is also just going to go to Costco. Now, I was always an anti-Costco person. And I say I was an anti-Costco person because my wife loves Costco, and I love Costco. Like, I do. The reason why I was always anti-Costco is because it was just a sign that I was getting old. That's all it was. Like,
A sign you're getting old?
That I like Costco.
I thought for sure you were going to say it was because you go in there and buy like a 10-gallon jar of pickles and you can't eat it fast enough.
No, it's just because, like, man, Costco is just showing you're becoming an adult. Like, when you start liking Costco, it's like, okay, I'm ready to wear sweatpants outside, like from Kirkland sweatpants. Like, you know, like that's the era you're stepping into. So, like, I would always be like, you know, complain when my wife wants to go to Costco. But I fall like Costco's brilliant. I mean, it's just brilliant. Even when it's packed, it flows so fast. And now it's really packed. The reason why they were my win is because they stood right on DEI. They didn't kiss the ring of Trump. And what you see is, man, the last time I went to Costco, people are waiting for carts. Like, there's no carts. There's like 10 people waiting for carts. I went and just got a cart from the thing and came back. But it was crazy. And then the membership line it's really true. And I think that's what I love about seeing people move is, like, if we move, we can make differences. Because what happened with Target? Target took their DEI stuff off, and then their stock hits, and now there's like, oh, my apology. A week later, it's back, and it doesn't feel the same. We still know you're a fraud. And this is why I'm a believer is that just like companies, just like politicians, we want to know, are you a fraud or not? And at the end of the day, that is what's going to be victory. And I think Costco showed everyone the value and ROI of that if you're able to stay in the octagon and stay strong. All right, beautiful people, there you have it. That was the 817 podcast. We might not have a show next week. Ann is not going to be here.
Sorry.
No.
I apologize.
You know, but
I'm going to visit my kids.
And, you know, California. The great place. All right. So anyways, we may or may not have a show. I am cooking and working on something, but it's probably 40% possible right now. But if I do get it done, I'm going to be uber excited. And I think you all will really appreciate it as well. Make sure you subscribe, share with a friend. Let's create a progressive movement. Come to the 817 Gather. See you guys soon.